Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into something I find really interesting, and that's what happens when people actually go for those big, sometimes a little out there childhood dreams instead of just, daydreaming about them.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? So many of us think about that, like those early things we wanted to do, and then life kind of gets in the way. But what happens when people actually commit to those paths? How does it shape their lives? How does it shape the lives around them?
That's exactly what we're going to look at. So we've got two incredible stories to dig into. One's about a community in New Zealand built on this radical idea of sharing everything, and the other is about a family who spent decades traveling the world.
Wow, two very different ways to go after a dream, right? One's about creating a community, the other, global exploration. But they both touch on those things we all want, right? Like connection, purpose, and maybe even leaving a mark on the world.
Right. And they both make you think about happiness, what we really value, and how we fit into the world. So let's start with this community in New Zealand. They call it Riverside. Okay, so imagine a place where, like, resources, income, even businesses are shared equally between everyone living there.
I mean, that really challenges how we normally think about ownership and success, doesn't it? It's almost like stepping into a different reality, like a social experiment happening right now.
It really is. One resident, her name is Daisy, she joined Riverside back in 2004. She was on a BBC program, and she said something like, the sharing of resources can give a group of people a big advantage. But then she also said, it doesn't matter how many hours you work or what kind of work you do. Everybody gets the same.
So that brings up a big question. Is a system like this something that can last, in the long run? Or is it just temporary? Like some people might say it's like utopia that will eventually fall apart when it hits real world problems.
And Daisy even said that the whole concept is so different from what we're used to that people outside the community just don't get it. She said some even call Riverside communist, but she insists it's not.
That's a perfect example of how we're raised and what we're taught shapes how we see things. We're just so used to competition and getting ahead on our own. So a system that's about sharing and working together can seem really, well, weird, to be honest.
That's exactly the word she used, outlandish. And it's fascinating because she says Riverside has people from all kinds of political backgrounds, not just those who, agree with communism. So there's something deeper going on here, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. It's like there's this deep belief in the power of sharing, a choice to put the group's good above individual gain.
Make you think about your own values, doesn't it?
Right.
Like, what would it take for you to make such a big change in how you see things?
Yeah, it really does. It makes you question all those ideas we have about success, what it means to own things, and what a fulfilling life really is.
All right, let's switch gears a bit and talk about this adventurous family, the Zapps. Remember all that wanderlust I mentioned? Get ready for some serious travel envy.
Oh, yeah, their story is like proof that you can really go after a dream, no matter how crazy it sounds to other people.
So back in 2000, Herman and Candelaria Zapp, they were childhood sweethearts, decided to go on a journey that would take them around the world. We're talking packing up, hopping into a vintage car, and hitting the road with less than $3,500.
That's a huge leap of faith, right? And think about it. They did all this before everyone had the internet and social media. They were really going into the unknown.
And now, 22 years later, they've been to, get this, over 100 countries with 3 kids who were born along the way.
That's amazing. But beyond, just how far they traveled and how many stamps are on their passport, what I find really interesting is how they changed on the inside. Like, what did they learn about themselves and the world through all of that?
Well, actually, Herman was on that same BBC program as Daisy, and he said something really deep about how the journey changed him. He said, I am so happy with the Herman there is now. Not the one who wanted to conquer the world, but the one who was conquered by the world.
There's so much to unpack in that statement, right? It's like he went from this ambition to like control everything, that ego thing, to realizing how big the world is and how small we are in comparison.
He's not talking about conquering like we normally think about it, like winning, but about being humbled by the world, changed by it. He even said he was like a grain of sand, seeming insignificant on its own, but a really important part of something much bigger.
Yeah, it really makes you think about your own place in everything. Like, how do the things we do, even the small things, affect the bigger picture? How do we fit into the whole story of life?
It's kind of wild how those two stories, like the sharing community and the family traveling, both make you think about your place in the world, even though they're so different.
Yeah, I think they both get at that idea of trying to live a life you feel good about, right? Whether it's by connecting with a community or exploring the world.
Exactly. And thinking back to Daisy in Riverside, I keep coming back to how she said people outside the community just couldn't wrap their heads around sharing everything.
Right. That really highlights, how much society shapes how we think. We're pretty much taught to think about owning things, competition, and looking out for number one. So when you see something like Riverside, where all that is flipped, it can seem threatening or totally unrealistic.
It makes you wonder, though, is Riverside this perfect, happy place where everyone's always getting along, or are there problems we're not seeing?
Yeah, that's a good point. Daisy was pretty clear that Riverside isn't communist. It's more like people from different political backgrounds choose to live there because they believe in sharing. But even if everyone has the same values, people are people, there's always going to be conflict.
So how does a place like Riverside actually work day to day? They share income from businesses, but what about everyday life? Do they all live in one big commune?
Well, we don't really get those details from the BBC show, but you can guess that people still have some freedom within the system. It's probably not about controlling every part of their lives, but more about making decisions and using resources as a group.
Yeah, it's definitely a new way to think about community and responsibility. And it makes you wonder, can a system like that last in the long term? Or is it going to run into trouble as it gets bigger?
That's tough to say. Anything so different is going to have its challenges. Keeping everyone happy, making sure everyone's contributing fairly, adapting to change, those are all things they'll have to deal with.
But even if Riverside isn't the perfect model for a new society, maybe there's still something to learn from it, right?
Totally. Their focus on working together, sharing responsibility, and putting the community first, those are things worth thinking about, even if their exact way of doing it isn't for everyone.
Makes sense. It's like taking those main ideas and seeing how they could work in different situations.
Hmm.
Okay, back to the other end of the spectrum. The Zaps and their crazy world travels.
If Riverside is about settling in one place and building a community, the Zaps are all about freedom, exploration, and growing as a person by seeing the world.
It is interesting how different they are, but both stories are about trying to live a life without regrets. Like making the most of the time we have.
They're like two different paths to the same goal, right? Riverside is through community and sharing, the Zaps are through adventure and experiencing the world.
And they both make you ask yourself, what does it really mean to live a good life? What are we willing to give up? What risks are we willing to take to feel like our lives have meaning?
They definitely challenge that idea of settling down, getting a job, and buying a bunch of stuff, right?
Totally. But let's be real, not everyone can just pick up and travel the world like the Zaps. So what's the lesson for the rest of us who can't just drop everything and chase butterflies around the globe?
Well, they were brave enough to break free from what society expects. They didn't let fear or practicality stop them. They made a choice and went for it.
And remember, they started with almost no money. It's not about being rich or waiting for the perfect time.
It's about having that drive, that willingness to go into the unknown, to step outside your comfort zone, and to value experiences more than things. And we can all do that, no matter what our situation is.
Okay, back to what Herman said about being conquered by the world. Sounds pretty intense, right? But what do you think he meant?
I think it's such a good way to describe a big change in perspective. He starts out wanting to conquer the world, like, wanting to be in charge, powerful, that whole ego thing. But then he realizes how vast and complex the world is, and it humbles him. He lets his experiences change him instead of trying to force his will on the world.
It's like he realized that you find true happiness when you accept the world, good and bad, and find your place in it.
Exactly. And that goes
Yeah.
back to his whole grain of sand thing. By ourselves, we might seem small, but we're all part of something much bigger.
That's deep, man. Makes you wonder, how do the things we do, even the small things, impact the bigger picture? What mark do we want to leave on the world, even in our own little corner of it?
That's worth thinking about. And maybe the answers aren't in the big things, but in the everyday choices we make. How we treat others, what we value, how we connect with our community and the world.
So maybe it's not about finding the one right way to live, but about making sure our actions line up with what we believe in, whether that's building a community like Riverside, exploring the world like the Zaps, or finding happiness in some other way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. There are lots of paths to a meaningful life. It's just about finding the one that feels right for you, for what you truly value.
And remember that book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying? We talked about that top regret, not being brave enough to follow your dreams. But what about the other four? Do they have anything in common?
We could do a whole deep dive on each regret, but they all seem to be about wishing you had lived a more authentic life. Many of them were because of choices made out of fear, pressure from society, or trying to please others instead of following your heart.
Makes you realize you can't waste time on what-ifs. We all have dreams that might seem impossible or even scary. But maybe these stories give us a little hope, a reminder that it's never too late to take a step, even a small one, towards a life that feels truer to who you are.
Yeah, it's about being brave enough to shut down those negative thoughts, those voices that say you're not good enough or can't do it.
And even small changes can have a big impact, not just on your own life, but on the people around you. Maybe trying to live a better life will inspire others to do the same.
That's the great thing about connecting with people, right? We inspire each other in ways we might not even realize.
So as we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I'd love to hear what you think. If you could get rid of one regret in your life, what would it be? And what small step can you take today to have fewer what-ifs and more "I'm glad I did's" in your life? It's kind of amazing how both Daisy and Herman, I mean, they went in such different directions, but they both seem to have found a way to live a life that feels true to them, like minimizing those what-if moments that we can end up regretting later.
Right, and I think it shows that being happy often comes from just being yourself, even if it means going against what everyone else is doing or taking a less traditional path.
Totally agree. It's not about trying to have this perfect life or chasing, some idea of success that someone else made up, but about creating a life that actually feels good and meaningful to you on your own terms.
And that brings us back to this whole utopia thing. Remember how Daisy said some people called Riverside communist or outlandish? It just shows how strong those societal norms are and how quick we are to judge anything that's different as, like, weird or dangerous.
It's like we're told there's only one right way to live, one way to be happy. But these stories, they challenge that, right? They suggest that maybe there are many different utopias out there, each one shaped by the people who create them and what they value.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. Both Riverside and the Zapp family, in a way, they're both choosing to step outside of mainstream society, just in different ways. Riverside builds this self-contained community where everything is shared, and the Zapps, they basically disengage from the system by living this nomadic life.
It's like they're both saying, hey, we're going to create our own happiness in our own way. And
Yeah.
it takes guts to do that. It makes you think.
Definitely. It makes you ask what parts of the normal way of doing things might we need to rethink, What are we clinging to that might actually be holding us back from being truly happy or going after what we really want?
Those are some big questions. But maybe that's the place to start, right?
Yeah.
Just recognizing that those societal norms, the things we take for granted, maybe they're not always the best way.
You got it. And asking those questions can lead to some amazing self-discovery. It's a journey, and there's no right answer for everyone. But maybe stories like these can help us, push us to look at our own values, question our assumptions, and consider other ways of living.
It's not about judging people who choose to live within those norms either. It's more about realizing that there are many ways to live and find happiness.
Yeah, the important thing is that your choices match up with what you believe in, whether that's community and sharing like Riverside, exploring the world like the Zapps, or finding your own way.
And let's not forget that point from the top 5 regrets of the dying. That top regret, not having the courage to go after your dreams. It's a serious reminder, Life's too short to let fear or what other people think control our choices.
It's like a wake-up call to chase those things we've been putting off, even if they sound crazy or unrealistic to others.
It's about taking those baby steps, making choices that reflect what you believe in and what you want. And who knows, maybe those little steps will lead you on an adventure like the Zapps, or to a community that inspires you like Riverside.
Or maybe they'll lead you to your own kind of utopia, a life that's authentic and without regrets.
Well said. And with that, we wrap up today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of dreams, regrets, and the search for a fulfilling life. Until next time, keep diving deep.